All right, we're going to go ahead and get started this morning. Well, I want to welcome everybody to Dewey Beach, Delaware. We get to kick off the meeting with Coordinating Council. What better way to kick it off? I am not your illustrious chair. She is joining us online, so I'm here for the meeting. So I'm going to be sitting in and chairing the meeting, but Kathy, you will hear her beautiful voice, I'm sure. So I will kick it over to Jeff here for a minute.
All right, thank you. We're just going to start off with a quick roll call. I'm going to go around for the folks that I do see in the room in hopes of just making that go a little bit quicker. Of course, we're missing our federal counterparts today, but kind of running north to south. We have Megan Ware from Maine. Renee Zobel is our acting chair from New Hampshire here. I do see Dan McKiernan, Jason McNamee of, Massachusetts, Dan, Jason McNamee, Rhode Island, Greg Wojcik from Connecticut is online. Good morning, Marty. Gary from New York, Heather Corbett in New Jersey. I do see Richard Wong across the table there, sitting for Delaware. Carrie Kennedy for Maryland, Joe Grist for Virginia, Brandy Salmon for North Carolina. We have Mel Bell sitting in for Ben Dyer for South Carolina. Kathy Knowlton is our chair virtual for Georgia, and Erica Burgess is here for Florida. We have Bob Beal for the Commission, John Carmichael for Mid-Atlantic Council, Julia Beatty for Mid-Atlantic Council. Oh, did I say that wrong? John, South Atlantic Council. I'm sorry if I just said that wrong. Ron Owens for PRFC, and then have myself, Jeff White, and Julie Simpson for ACCSP. Did I miss anyone, either in the room or online, that we have accomplished a roll call?
Excellent.
Back to you.
Okay. We'll get to the first item on the agenda, which is the approval of the agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda? Seeing no changes to the agenda is approved by consent. Moving on to the proceedings from the May 2025 meeting. Are there any amendments or changes that need to happen to the meetings minutes from May? Yes, go ahead.
Just a minor edit. My last name is spelled wrong. It has one T, but there's two T's in the minutes. Not a big deal.
Thank you, Julia. We will note that. Any other changes to the meeting minutes? Seeing no other changes, we'll make that edit, and those are approved. Okay, moving right down the list, open time for public comment about anything that is not on the agenda. Is there any public comment about an item not on the agenda this morning? Seeing none. That moves us on to considering the FY 2026 ACCSP project and administrative proposals for funding. I'm going to pass it over to Julie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the first thing that we're going to do is look at the comparison rankings of the maintenance projects. On the left-hand side is the operations, and the advisors on the right-hand side. This is just to note that all the projects are supported, but there's different orders based on the group, and that we wanted to show you those. In the past, one of the things that we have noticed is that the operations committee, by virtue of having more people, usually sort of dominates the rankings. One of the things that you will notice here for the new projects is that the order of the final combined rankings is actually reflective of the advisors committee. So that shows you how closely things are ranked. Carrie? Absolutely. No one ever says that. Thank you. Okay, so yes, all I was saying was this is the operations and the advisors rankings, and this is just to show you the difference between the two in the order. And unlike past years, every person has an individual ranking, which is the same every year. But normally, because there are more operations committee members, their rankings sort of dominate. And in this case, the order that the advisors chose for new rankings is actually reflected in the combined rankings. And you'll see that as you get to the scores. The score ranges are very close in some of these new projects, and that's why that happened. Okay, so I'm just going to move down here to the ACCSP funding summary. This is just to show you why we did full rankings, and that's because there's a little bit of uncertainty in the funding, especially compared to previous years. So if you look at the 3.35 column, which is the first column, you'll note that when you get to the maintenance difference, there is a deficit in the 3.35, but not in the 3.5 budget. So provided that we get the 3.5, we will fund all the maintenance projects and there would be plenty of money. And that would normally mean that we would do condensed rankings. But because that isn't true at 3.35, we wanted to do full rankings so that the scores had that higher level of granularity. There's obviously not enough money under either budget to fund all projects in both categories. So, but this is just a breakdown of what you would normally see across the top of the spreadsheet, and it's just a little bit easier to read in this format. Okay, so on the next slide, this is just the text from the recommendation of the Operations and the Advisors Committee. This is at the 3.5 level funding recommendation, and this is for the maintenance and new proposals. One of the things to note in these recommendations is that, unfortunately, the timing of the Operations and Advisory Committee meant that the federal folks were able to attend day 1, but not day 2 when we had the rankings. So one of the reasons that we are unsure about the viability of the Southeast Fishery Science Center project being partially funded is that we have not had anyone from that group to weigh in on that. So just a little bit of a visual and a little more detail on this for the 3.35 or 3.5. So under this, they would fully fund all the maintenance proposals and the administrative budget. So very straightforward on the maintenance side. Under the new proposals, the primary proposal, next slide, is to fund the Rhode Island black sea bass proposal and then to partially fund the Southeast Fishery Science Center. Because there's uncertainty on whether or not partial funding is viable for that project, the operations and advisors have offered an alternative on the next slide, which is to fully fund the Rhode Island black sea bass, fully fund the next proposal in line, which is the electronic reporting in Massachusetts, and then to partially fund the New York fishery dependent sampling. And New York has indicated that they can work with partial funding. So this option is viable. The next slide is a little bit different. It's the idea of what if there is 3.35? How does that work? Because it doesn't fully fund all the maintenance proposals. The recommendation then is to first fully fund the first 4 maintenance proposals, partially fund the North Carolina proposal, and then again we have alternatives for the new proposals. So moving down, again, we just have the fully fund administration and then fund everything as listed in the 3.5 column. And North Carolina said that that would be a viable option for them as well. For the new proposals, the first option is to, again, fund black sea bass and, if possible, fund the Science Center. This may be a different question of viability because now their viability is working with less funds. So the question would be, is it viable at that funding rate? If it's not, the alternative is to fund the black sea bass, fully fund the Massachusetts proposal, and then use the remaining funding to make the North Carolina maintenance proposal whole. So those are the recommendations as outlined by the Operations and Advisory Committee. And I will turn it back to you to discuss.
Does anyone have any questions for Julie about what was just presented? Yes, go ahead, Jay.
Yeah, thanks. I just want to make sure I'm understanding, and thanks for the presentation, Julie. I want to make sure I'm understanding the, there's like 2 key uncertainties here, right? Which kind of drives our contingency-driven proposal. There is, we don't know if, it's going to be 3.35 or 3.5, right? That's the first one. And then the second one has to do with the ability of the that Southeast Fisheries Science Center proposal, whether they can, make do with kind of less than what they asked for or not, which we can't know right now because we can't talk to them. Is that correct?
Yep, that's very well summarized.
Any other questions for Julie? Anyone have any motions that they would like to bring forward about the funding? Jason McNamee, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So I will make a motion to approve the funding proposal that was recommended by the Operations Committee. And so I'm kind of trying to shortcut having to describe all of the things, but it's basically as it's been proposed today in the presentation.
Just give Madeline a second to get that up, and then
Joe Grist has hand up.
Joe, is your hand up to second? Yeah, okay. Seconded by Joe Grist. Thanks for the patience online. We're just doing motions on the fly here. Okay, great. Is there any discussion on the motion on the board? Seeing none, is there any opposition to the motion on the board? Let's perfect it briefly here. All right. Jason, do you mind reading it as written back into the record for us?
Yep. Move to approve the funding proposal recommendations by the Operations and Advisory Committee as proposed today.
Thank you. Okay, I'll ask one more time. Any opposition to the motion on the board? Seeing no opposition, the motion is approved by consent. Back to you, Jeff.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And that went quicker than expected. So well done, everybody. Thanks for your attention on and looking at the future projects and things. We do have several program updates for you today. We have program points and in between sections, as you saw in the presentation that was distributed. But again, if there are burning questions, just flag us down and we will answer them in the moment. Next slide, please. So looking at our existing funding, there's been a fair amount of activity in trying to follow the bouncing ball of what projects that had been previously approved actually received funding, where things did not go as well as planned, and also an update on where the FY25 funds were able to be distributed. And so the kind of stoplight approach we've got here is for one project we had through FIS, the Fisheries Information System, and their Inflation Reduction Act. ACCSP had a modernization proposal that was ranked highest among all of them, and yet the funding was not able to be allocated in time, and therefore was rescinded at the money movement process. So that's we recognized we were searching outside funding to do some infrastructure updates, make our systems a bit more scalable and disaster proof, redundant there. And that one, we've had to shift where that goes. For FY24, there was some funding that didn't make it in that fiscal year, was supposed to have been handled in FY25. And the one of those projects that is still outstanding is the the state of Maine's lobster reporting. There's about $234,000 of the total $335 that was approved that has not yet been allocated. We thought that was found within Garfo abilities to move at some point this summer, and only learned at the end of September that that's still pending. For the FY 2025, there are a few projects that are still delayed. One of those is the ACCSP admin grant. Not all of that has been distributed to the commission to date. We are expecting that to happen once things open up and can be accomplished. There was also a project in the state of Maine for a black sea bass sampling. That one also is pending funding processing. On the good news, of the FY25 ACCSP projects that were approved, there are 4 on screen that the funds actually were moved to those partners to begin those projects. Most of those did not have the funding move until very late in the summer. and their start dates are kind of variable. So things are moving, but they have been a bit delayed. Next slide. This slide highlights projects that, thanks to our chair, vice chair, and Bob Beal, we're able to find some other sources of funds, and these all expire in the end of June 2026. And so these were all intended to kind of make the direction of the coordinating council whole and fulfilled. So the top two projects were 2024 partner projects that we were able to fund through ACCSP, the 2024 Rhode Island socioeconomic value of fisheries, and also some of the state of Maine's lobster harvesting, as well as some halibut age sampling equipment. So those two have been kind of approved and are out and active. The next two projects have to do with improving the infrastructure and kind of recovering a portion of the IRA proposal that was not funded elsewhere. So that's extending our Oracle Cloud infrastructure for ACCSP databases, and also to extend some data validations for both SAFES e-trips, the harvester reporting program, and electronic dealer reporting. And that those validations will occur whether dealers and fishermen are using ACCSP software or other software that passes through that API. So those are two projects that were also approved for movement and completion before June. The last two projects are really about extending regional projects to support where we expected some funds to come through, and that was unable to occur anywhere between January and August of 2025. The Charter Observer data centralization for Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina. This was a database design created at the Gulf States Fisheries Commission, and they very generously shared that with us, but we need to install that into our environment and apply that to the changes for a South Carolina database in Access that is kind of collecting this field work and then submitting that so that we have kind of a bit more centralized storage for that. The other one is following through on the MRIP for hire logbook methodology. We had a peer review for that a while back, and we finally identified funds to do some more statistical work, make that more robust, and respond to the comments of the peer review. So those projects are all in motion and were really supported by, again, the leadership team of Kathy, Renee, and Bob over the last several months. So I appreciate all of your efforts to do that, and wanted to make sure that we were transparent and clear with the coordinating council about how those choices were made and what projects we've been able to support at this point. So I did want to pause here and just see if anyone on the council has questions at this point.
I would like to add that it was a great partnership between the commission and ACCSP that allowed these funds to move around. So just kudos, highlight to the relationship between the commission and ACCSP that these projects were able to be funded during a particularly challenging situation. So I just wanted to make sure I added that. Okay, any questions for Jeff? Seeing no questions, continue on.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. The next section of program updates are on recreational data collection. I wanted to really highlight the process here. All three of these sections are really about the utility of the ACCSP to bring the state partners to the table, come up with regional solutions, and then bring those forward to MRIP as the kind of MRIP governing body and things had planned back in about 2015, pardon me. So the first one is the recreational release catch card project. It is a pilot project having to do with the APIS dockside. It was designed to address priority 3, which is improved recreational fishery discard and release data. As you can see from the list of states, it was really exciting. We had 8 states participating in a pilot, which is a pretty broad pilot, but it really got feedback in terms of what was happening and what was possible throughout the whole range of MREP data collection on the Atlantic coast. Next slide. It uses paper catch cards to hand out to fishermen, so that they can record what's happening during their trip, as opposed to being asked after the trip. So what is that ability to kind of pre-plan or record that during your fishing trip? And is that mode of or method of data collection providing more detailed information about lengths of fish released, or better, closer numbers on how many fish are being released? It was really based on the modified sampling design of APIS to maintain the sampling probabilities, so it could be expanded if the pilot goes well. The data could be expanded after the fact, and again, this is handing out catch cards before the fishing trip. So for 2025, 8 states data collection waves 3 through 5. They had about 400 catch 6-hour, actually 7 to 8 hour catch card assignments. They went out early to hand out the catch cards beforehand. There were about 1,600 cards distributed, and about 400 of those were returned, which is about a 20% return rate. And there were also 800 fish lengths that were provided, where folks caught, measured, and released their fish as they went. And it's been really interesting. We've had requests already for this data. There's a high level of interest in the project. One of the proposals that was in your motion to move forward was the 2nd year of data collection for this. And we're really kind of excited about the potential for this to be added as a modification to APIS in the future. So we're glad to see that South Carolina Council and Commission Stock Assessment folks were interested in this. And if you have further questions about the catch card project, Alex DeJohnson and Trevor Shuffle with our recreational team are here and would be happy to tell you a lot more details. Moving on to the next section. This is about adding questions to APIS. The first one of these is about adding area fished to MREP APIS. This originally came up through the state of Massachusetts. So Dan, as we address this for both Massachusetts and New England Council about different stock areas, it's about looking at more detailed where the fishing occurred, and using APIS as kind of a comprehensive, unbiased coverage of all of the fishing up and down the coast. And this type of geographic granularity was included in the first implementation plan recreational data needs that ACCSP completed in, I think, 2016. So the method of this would be to show folks a map with a grid area if it's a non-key question, which means if it's not answered, it doesn't end the interview, you just keep going. And if they do answer it, then there's a potential to skip a couple of other questions and kind of keep going. This grid area it would not be used for estimation. The math doesn't add up on the cell by cell basis, but it would be included in the MREP data for the download data, so the stock assessment folks could use it. So RecTech's been really good about going through all of these details, not just what's the question, what's the map, what's the scale, but how would the data be used, how would it be available? So when folks ask about the process of adding a question to MREP, it's pretty robust and it does take a little while. The next slide shows a couple of examples of what those grid areas would look like. They're talking about one moment.
Hey, Jeff. Would it be possible to shut the doors? Is this getting a little loud out there?
No.
They're drowning you out down on this end.
Oh, for some reason, we have a hidden slide. Gremlins got in there. There we go. We found it. Thank you, Madeline. There are different size grid cells that are being shown here, a 10-minute, a 30-minute, and a full 60-minute or 1 degree based grid cells. They have different granularity of what kind of depth, distance from shore, whatever may be able to be inferred from that. However, RecTech is looking into the possibility of what anglers might be willing to answer, and kind of do kind of a feasibility test of what the tablets and the software might be able to accomplish. So this testing of the technology and moving in this direction is likely to happen in 2026 as a feasibility study. A couple slides later, we talk about a little bit about Paperwork Reduction Act, but there's request for that would have to what is the burden on fishermen and when does PRA approval occur, has to be part of a timeline of changing any MRIP questions. And so that's why there's kind of the note of including the PRA consideration when they get that far. Another item where Rec Tech has been responsive to requests from others is looking at a question in a data collection within APHIS for depredation. There's a place already in the survey that talks about released fish and the disposition, or kept fish and their disposition. And so they wanted to monitor the frequency and extent of depredation events. This was raised and brought up through HMS, and the intent is really to provide data to estimate excess mortality for stock assessments, similar to post-release mortality type items. And so if we go to the next slide, it's really the addition of certain disposition codes. So this was a functional adjustment we could make in the software. Alex and the software contractors are making this change pretty much in the next few weeks, so that they can begin the data collection in 2026. Again, it impacts PRA burden of adding additional questions. I will say that HMS has done a great job of preparing these questions, providing all the different codes, working with all the states to kind of come to agreement about how it would work, and then being flexible with if they wanted to add a question that has to pass through PRA, that process doesn't occur till 2026, and they would add another question to the survey after the approval takes place. And so we're able to move forward on this one because it's a new code to an existing question. And with that, I've hinted at PRA, but I will talk about it just a little bit more. The Paperwork Reduction Act manages and through Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs and Office of Management and Budget, essentially measures the angler time burden to provide the information and participate in the survey, and then it's multiplied by how many people get interviewed for the whole year in all the different states. So the screenshot above, all federal fisheries data falls under PRA in one sense or another. Julie will talk about it a little bit later when it comes to our software development, but this screenshot is all the different PRA items that apply to SAFES e-trips. So there's a variety of these things that happen based on the survey, the mandatory data reports that occur, but PRA kind of impacts everything. And sometimes when we think, oh, it's just adding a question, it's simple, and then there's only a 3-year cycle for PRA review, and not surprisingly, that process is a little slower today than it has been in the past. So it's something that just has to be worked with as we go through that. The next slide is just a highlight in the MRIP estimation review. MRIP has put a lot of effort in the last few years to identify in the re-envisioning state partnerships and how to have more state review and internal review of their estimates to identify not just what is an outlier, but what was the cause of that, and can they document what that cause is, and be able to not repeat investigations of the same odd data point that actually was part of the survey and is a valid piece. So what they're now doing is each wave requesting the states look at the estimates from the current wave and the previous wave, flag particular items that they're listed here under what's needed from reviewers, but they're providing the state leads, and through our recreational team, they've provided a R script that kind of standardizes how to scroll through the estimates and look for unusual events and flag those for human review. And so that process, once that starts really happening, each wave is going to be a better way to identify, track, and adapt to estimates that are unusual. And how well has it been working out so far? Next slide is just a brief item that highlights for calendar 2024. They went through 3 of these reviews, not 6 for last year. But just showing on screen, there were about 32 catch estimates that were flagged for investigation by 8 states. I absolutely appreciate your staff participating in this process, and would highlight it's really most beneficial when the state MRIP leads are able to interact with their state stock assistant biologists, technical committee members, kind of figure out what is odd and how can we channel that feedback back to MRIP to make things better as an ongoing basis. So if you're one of the states that provided a large number of items, thank you for doing that. Other states, if you want to have the opportunity to jump in and participate in this process a little bit more, you're absolutely welcome to do that, and that would be wonderful. That ends my recreational item summary. So it's an opportunity to pause for questions around the table or online. Brandy.
Yeah, do you happen to have an example of one of the scenarios that got flagged?
I do not. Alex, do you have one off the top of your head? Or Trevor, do you have one off the top of your head? Or I think we'll have to follow up with you on that one. Thank you, Alex. And since you were away from a microphone, the folks online, I'll just repeat. Basically, there were probably high estimates, and he can follow up with ones that were in North Carolina. But if you usually it's looking for unusually high estimates or things that have been flagged as outliers, and identify, was that evaluated by MRIP staff to say, yep, that was a real event, and this is why it calculated through as high, or some other approach. Thank you. Anything else? Oh, sorry. I see Jason, but was there someone before that? Rich, sorry, I think your hand was up first.
I'm sorry, that was the same question.
Okay.
Thank you. But I do have a question about disposition codes. If you want to stay on that topic, that's fine. But otherwise, I have a question about the disposition code.
Go ahead.
Okay. So those new disposition codes, they look pretty helpful. They're informative. Is that going to be in the APIS survey, or just HMS, only for HMS species?
They're going to be part of the APIS intercept survey, and I think there's 3 questions that are flagged for what was the disposition of those released fish. Were they released alive? And again, those options become available for the angler to select from. Jason?
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. And I have a series of questions. I'll just go one at a time and then let others have a chance. So the first one that I have is on the card program. Like, all of this stuff is really cool. So I applaud all the work. I think, all of these things could vastly improve and help that data set. So it's all good stuff. So with the cards, I guess I was wondering, so we collect the data, what's the plan, once we have the information, and, you can probably generate some internal metrics like return rates and things like that to kind of know the efficacy of, are people actually returning these things, and what's that look like? But then I was wondering, are there going to be comparisons made, for instance, like a comparison to the standard MRIP discard length protocol, or volunteer angler data as another thing? So I'm asking the question because maybe there is a plan already, but if not, I think that would be a good thing to do.
Thank you. Yes, when the subcommittee was developing it, they did talk about a variety of things that they'd be testing. So one of those was how much earlier before assignment should they go out to hand out catch cards? How well does handing out catch cards during an assignment work? Does it impact the number of interviews that can be done during an assignment if they're focused on both handing out a catch card and interviewing somebody after the fact? There are planned comparisons to the rounding errors or the digit bias of how many fish of a particular species were released there, and seeing how the number and type of releases that came back relative to the standard APIS survey. Because these were overdrawn assignments, they were created as additional sampling that after the kind of some of those data analysis things occur, they might be possible for MRIP to use those as part of the standard APIS survey and increase those intercepts. They've got some tweaks in year 2 to try and get this as a higher activity sites. They want to look at how these data could get folded into the estimation process. So there is a plan that's kind of evolving, but because the data collection is still occurring right now, they're not yet to the full data analysis stage from year 1.
Thanks for that, Jeff. Just a quick follow. So I in particular, the last thing you said there, I think that's super important. It's kind of nice. You have almost like a parallel experiment going on, so you can do those direct comparisons. That's great. And so I would just encourage a kind of an external comparison as well, kind of like a, I don't know, out of bag type of comparison. And in particular, I'm wondering about the volunteer angler data, you know, discard lengths that are generated through other types of programs, and whether it looks similar or really different. But that's just, I think, an important piece of information. However, in particular, if we want to use this for estimation, having it within this statistical design is really important. So I appreciate that as well. But thanks.
Thank you, Jason. Other questions around the room? Seeing none. Any hands online? Not at the moment. Jason's got another one then.
Yeah, I got it. So this one and one more if there's time. So the grid idea is also super cool. I like how you're kind of looking at it across. It's funny that last for like the biggest frame that you have sort of is not consequential for, it's all of Rhode Island because they're so small. But I think that refinement is really cool. You mentioned it's in the presentation, and you mentioned, it won't be used for estimation. And so I was thinking about that a little bit, and I think I understand why, but I wondered about why you can't maybe use it in the estimation. I think what you mean is harvest and discard estimation. But what about like activity? Depending on their refinement, you could kind of understand that. So I think there is some estimate that you can generate out of there, like where the activities kind of happening along the coast and inshore, offshore as well. So just to keep in mind, I think it's good information, but to kind of take that a step further, I think it would be valuable and okay to do with the data set. So have you guys been talking about like how you're going to use it in that way, or not quite yet?
Let me try for that. And then Alex, if you have more to add, you're welcome to come up to a microphone and do that, just to prep you for that. Throughout these discussions, John Foster of MRIP has been participating in about why it would or would not be able to be part of the standard MRIP catch and harvest estimates. Because if you only have, if you have effort information that fishing occurred, but you only have catch information and discard information from a lower subset by those grid cells, then do you have enough data matching up grid cell by grid cell to do the calculations? And he basically was saying that it comes to a low data availability, impossible to calculate catch by grid cell. And so that was my non-statistical explanation. But they can follow up on that one further. I do think there would be utility to say we have evidence of fishing in these areas of marine spatial areas, and there might be analysis that could be done there. I would only suggest that that may not be an MRIP estimation task, but by having the data in the download files, which meets the criteria for their public data use, availability, et cetera, it would be available to the stock assessment folks to assign stock areas, and it would be available to look at marine spatial use planning, et cetera, but not as but that would be a after the survey task, not a task for MRIP staff to accomplish. And I'm just careful to separate those things so that it's not assumed who would be doing the work. All right, thank you, Jay. And I don't see other hands, and yes, we have time because we're ahead of schedule, so go ahead.
Thank you, and thanks for that. That was a great response. Thanks for that, Jeff, for the last question. And then, so my final one was on that MRIP review. So I'll ask, this is like a two-part. You got highly caffeinated, Jay, first thing in the morning, sorry. So the R script, that sounds really cool. And I'm imagining it's like an audit. And so maybe there are bounds of what's a reasonable like length at this, you know, for the species, that sort of thing. And if you're above or below it, maybe it throws a flag or something like that. So I'd be interested to hear, you know, a little bit more about how the R script works. And then, so this, you know, we've talked a little bit about this already. And so we have this mechanism now for IDing things that we want to investigate further, which is great. And then like what happens? So you ID something, it gets referred back. And then is there like the potential that that could change, or is it just kind of like a case by case thing? I just wondered about, like, we've got the first half, and I wondered what happens if you actually identify a problem. Like, I'm remembering like a few years back where we did similar things, and like 9 times out of 10, it was like, yeah, it's a weird number, but everything like looks good. So that's the number. And so I'm wondering if that's different now or just kind of the same.
Okay, thanks. The R script is way out of my depth, but I will say that people that are good at that have worked on it. What exactly it accomplishes, I'm not aware of, but the real exciting part is there's a standard way for each state with different knowledge to look at the estimate information and flag the same types of things for human review. So we were excited about it. It wasn't just going to be a few states that had really cool ideas doing it one way and other states doing it a different way. And so the standardization of that process was really, I think, important for the whole coordinating council to hear. What happens with those estimates, I know Lucas and the MRIP team have been evaluating these, and they've not only just doing the evaluation, but documenting what happens. So I think there have been cases where an unusual estimate or an outlier has been, you know, removed or downweighted, et cetera. And so there have been changes to those estimates based on the reviews. There are other cases where the estimate stands and yet it has a documented description of where the MRIP team went through and said, oh, it was because this happened in the effort survey, this happened in the dockside survey, this was where there was a conversion factor that affected it. And we actually there was an interview that saw that fish, and, you know, and it came through. I'm so impressed with the state staff that are doing the survey in the field. There's places where it's many years ago now, but it was, oh, there's no way you cut a grouper with a fly rod from shore. And, it's like, well, yeah, it was weird. And the interviewer thought it was weird. So he took a picture and then he told their state lead who talked to MRIP, and like it followed the chain all the way through. So, the folks are out there and they're collecting the data and they care, and it comes back through when they say, oh, yep, it did happen. It was weird, but, sometimes it stands, but if they're really high PSEs, then you recognize as a high PSE. All right, sorry everybody for the long answer there, but Rich, you have an idea, go ahead.
I just had another question. If Jay, are you done? Okay. Well, I actually agree with Jay. All of this work with the MRIP amendments and the catch cards, it's really incredibly needed information, and we've needed it for quite a long time. But in particular, I was curious about the catch card, the future for the catch card program. Is this going to be continued or expanded going forward? Because I think we're almost underappreciating how important those catch cards are going to be, given the changes that are ahead for black sea bass, summer flounder, and scup management, maybe even bluefish. And when we go to a total catch, move to a total catch management approach. So I guess that's my question is, what's the future plans for the catch cards? Thanks.
The crystal ball, strategic plan for that would be do a second year of field sampling with the catch card pilot project in 2026. If the data analysis and everything works out after that, then it would be ask MRIP to include that as the standard methodology for the Atlantic coast, and then it would become part of every APIS assignment, and as one way to get the data back and get more detail on released fish. So that process has borne through in the past, where there was a pilot project for how to collect headboat data in 2003 or 2004. I bet Kathy can raise a hand and correct me. And that became the standard headboat at Sea Observer MRIP process on the Atlantic coast, starting in, I think, 2005. So there's a bit more process and review now than there was at that point, but that's the theme of find a regionally important project, pilot test it, bring it to MRIP, and bring it into the fold of the standard methodology. And that's the ultimate plan, if all the stars align to get that far. And with that, we'll go to Brandy at the far end of the table.
Yeah, I agree. It is very important data to have, but I definitely want to caution on the fact that it would be interesting to see how that affects the amount of APIS surveys we actually obtain. And so North Carolina has been in a unique situation where we're having a lot of people not revolting, but are getting frustrated with how many attempts that we're making to try to acquire recreational data. And the main thing that we really need is for them to participate in the APIS surveys. If they're handed a catch card in the beginning, are they more likely or less likely to participate in the APIS surveys after the fact? So just something to keep in mind with that project, because I know North Carolina has been experiencing that already.
Thank you, Brandy. I appreciate the local knowledge on that one. I'm not seeing any more hands here. Do we have any online? Not at the moment. So I'm going to, I think, move us forward. The next section of presentation slides are with Julie.
Thank you, Jeff. So I'm just going to start out with some major software project timelines. This is the Southeast Coastal Logbook and HMS Logbook. We sort of wrapped up the development on those earlier in the year. We are on track for the one-stop reporting at the end of the year, and then also the EDR redesign in early January, and then registration tracking will be going into 2026. So we'll just dig a little bit into each of those projects now. So the first one is the one-stop reporting. This is essentially something that we've incorporated a lot of the federal aspects of this yet, but not the state aspects of it. And so we did a lot of talking with the folks at Comtech and IS in the spring and gathering some information there. And we're going to be compiling some direction to move us forward into 2026 by the end of this year so that the partners can review that. The short answer to what is one-stop reporting from the state perspective is, if I'm answering a federal report and there is a question that the state asks, that question would also get added to their federal report, not just their state reports. So if you want to know the number of TTOG as well as the weight, we could add that question to that form regardless of whether or not it is a state or federal form. The lookup lists would still be federal if there's a federal form, but we would be able to add state questions if those permits also existed. So that's the direction of one-stop reporting, and the goal is to just get more information that the states are looking for, regardless of whether or not they're filling out your state forms. The next project is the registration tracking. This is the project that's focused around the participant information, so the permits, the vessels, and the people. Most importantly, this one is focused on not just the person, but how that person is related to various entities. In some cases, a person operates individually. They might also operate as part of a corporation. Sometimes one corporation owns another corporation. It can be very complicated, and that can be difficult to track. So we're enhancing that portion of the database. And we're also starting to implement or looking at the implementation of potential roles. So I can be the person who owns the permit, and especially in cases in the for-hire, I might own that boat. I own the permit. It's my responsibility, but I have the captains reporting for me. And so they should be able to see the reports they enter and not the reports that the other captains enter. But I want to see all the reports for that permit because it's my permit. So those are some of the enhancements that we're working on. It requires touching a lot of the underlying database and a lot of the applications as well. So it is a slow but steady project. We are also working in conjunction with a federal project where they are consolidating the vessel permits on the Atlantic coast. So we have been working with them so that our structures align as much as possible so that we can exchange data with the feds and actually still identify the same entity across both databases. Their project made excellent progress this summer, and obviously for obvious reasons is currently on hold at the moment. We are interested in working with one or two folks in 2026 to sort of test the new structure. So I know Massachusetts is one of the partners that has had historic. It would be easier if we could identify these folks. So hint, hint. If you're interested in working with us, we would love to work with you on that. Not that I'm pointing anyone out. The next project is the Southeast Coastal Logbook and the HMS Logbook. These are both logbooks out of the Southeast Fisheries Science Center. We did complete the development of these. Simultaneously, earlier in the year, there was an East Coast Logbook project. The purpose of this project is to centralize the federal logbook data for the Atlantic and the Gulf. Because of that project, the Southeast was interested in the data not going to the Southeast Fisheries Science Center, but going into this new database. So even though we have the development ready, they are not ready to put these logbooks electronically in the field. So folks are still using paper for these logbooks, which annoys some of them, but that's the way it is right now. The federal project was also delayed. They were planning on being done in September. We were supposed to be able to move data to them then. However, they got caught up in some PRA, as Jeff mentioned earlier, issues, and they also have some issues with a new mandate on federal systems having multi-factor authentication, which is a thing for them. It's a mandate that they have to follow, and it's fairly complicated. Obviously, at this point, we will just hold this development until the feds are back and can continue to work on their project. But at this point, ACCSP is just essentially sitting on, hey, we developed this and we're ready to go. So as soon as they're ready to go, we're ready to go. The last one is sort of our major project for the year. This is the EDR redesign. I know you guys have heard about this before, but I wanted to start out by saying thank you to everybody. We have had a lot of partner involvement throughout the year. We are meeting every 3 weeks with staff from your folks, and we are getting a lot of feedback. We ask a lot of questions on email, and I think it's been a really excellent process in terms of constant collaboration. So the product that we deliver is something that not only everyone has already seen, but they know how it's going to work. They're helping out with the outreach to the dealers. So things are going very well from that perspective. So I just wanted to start out with a thank you. One of the key points here is that first bullet, which is the progressive web app. The progressive web application is how we're building the EDR online. Essentially, this is something that you can use on your web browser. It works really well on a computer. It also works very well on a tablet. It's not quite where we want it to be on a phone, but it is pretty good. Right now, you do need to be connected to the internet to use that, but we're hoping in the future that that might be something that we can change and it can be available offline. But the most important aspect of this is that because it's something that we can make it more usable on the phone, it is usable on the tablet, and it's one application. It means that in contrast to some of the other ACCSP applications in Safest, we do not have an external contract for this. We are building it entirely in-house. So we've consolidated the development internally by using the new modern technology, and we've removed the need for an external contract. So that's something that it's a really key point to this project. There's been a lot of discussion about, that's the online version. There's also the file upload version. There's been a lot of discussion about that because it was a very old application that had been written in Perl, and it was a very old application that lives on a server that's dying. And it was written by some folks at Garfo. And so Garfo has been helping us to redevelop that application. And one of the key points to that is that we are integrating the validation. So the same validation package that looks at the online is going to look at the file upload. And that's a key point because that wasn't true in the past. And so there were essentially different rules for submission under file upload, and we wanted to make that go away so that everything is validated the same way. There are some folks who are going to be moving to the API. The API is not just for vendors. There are some dealers that actually have fairly large operations, and rather than exporting a file and uploading it, they can actually talk directly to the API. We already have a vendor that services 5 of the dealers and has reached out to us and is working on transitioning those 5 folks to directly submit to the API and get away from this file upload thing. I think if we had our ideal world, that's the way most of the dealers would go. They would either enter their data online or go to the API, but there are some folks that just don't have the in-house technology for that, but it is moving in that direction. So there are a lot of other moving parts in here, but just the wrap up really is we appreciate the time and effort that folks have been spending on the collaboration. And despite the fact that we don't have our federal friends at this moment, we are moving forward with this. So we appreciate all of the outreach that the state folks are doing and the council folks are doing to get to dealers, because we don't have the federal component of outreach and support at this point. Does anybody have any questions on that before we move on to biomodule stuff? Oh, okay. You want to call them people?
Carrie, go ahead.
Thanks, Madam Chair, Vice Chair. I just wanted to make the point to thank you very much for all your work on the one-stop reporting. I know our state license holders on our coast are very interested in participating and using that product. And they have been very clear with us that they want to volunteer to be testers, at least a couple of them, before it's implemented. And I will ensure that we work internally to make sure that this project is working. But just for the record, don't hesitate to reach out if you guys need anything on that. Maryland is very interested in this project.
Jason.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, so I'll piggyback off of that comment and maybe come at it from another angle. So there's not been testing yet, as I understand it. And so there's nervousness about that, because I think some folks are feeling I really need to kind of get in there, test it so I can understand how to then describe it to my dealers and things like that. And so maybe you could talk a little bit about your confidence, and I guess it's the, testing hasn't occurred and it's a January 1, like that's not super far away. So, if you could talk a little bit, I'm hoping you're confident, you can make me confident about that.
Okay, yes, sorry. I had OSR in my head in the first minute there, but I caught up with you. So yes, we've actually we've actually done a number of demonstrations with folks. So they're not poking around in it yet, but they've actually seen the application a number of times. Most recently, it was about a week ago, we actually tested it. We asked all the states and all the partners actually to say, do you have a dealer that would be willing to do this with us? We've actually demonstrated it with the dealers themselves already. So we've worked with the dealers and we were like, what do you think of this? And for better or worse, they were very happy with the application. Their complaints were all about the regulations, which we couldn't do anything about. So we told them we'd pass on that information. But from the good standpoint, we're very confident because they liked the application. And they felt that it looked like it was easy to use. Some of the things that they said, there was one person who said, I've typically used Trip Ticket because it can do this. And we were like, well, this is what we've built to do that. And they were like, oh, I really like that. And right now they have to switch back and forth because they have to do HMS in one and then go back to everything else. And they were doing Trip Ticket in the other because they liked it better. And they were like, oh, I'm probably just going to use this new one instead of switching back and forth. We will very likely have this available for poking around in the next week or two. So partners can start poking around in it. We will also have the file upload available for poking around in the same timeline. So there's a lot of poking around that is going to be happening. We've also already talked to the test dealers about the change that's going to happen with file upload. The only change is going to be before you upload that file. Right now there are no column headers. We're going to ask folks to add column headers. So that's going to be their big change. And we did tell those dealers that, and they were like, oh, well, it's not a big deal. So they were very like, okay. I was like they were expecting this, like, oh, you did this outreach and told us this thing was coming, and now it turns out to be a big or nothing. And I was like, excellent. I want it to be a big nothing. Like, we would much rather give you a lot of warning and then have you be like, underwhelmed with the amount of change that comes your way. So that's what we're experiencing so far. I will be honest, there will always be people that will complain. And so we do anticipate that there will be people that will be like, you made me change something and I don't like it, even though it's better. Because I think that's always the nature of change, is that there's some folks that are just resistant to it. But everything we've done so far is been very well received. And we are going to be doing a lot more outreach in terms of flyers and messages coming up, and more opportunity for folks to poke around. But they have all at least sat through to at least 2 demos. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah, thanks, Julie. And it does help. And, you know, the demos are good. I had, you know, recognized that there had been some demonstrations. It's just, I think it's different, right? So you get the demo, and when you're actually now testing, so you take the training wheels off, it's different. And I just worry a little bit about, well, maybe I'll ask a question in this way. If you run into issues where you're like, oh man, that's bad, we need to reprogram or modify, do you feel like you have enough time? And if not, what's the impact of, what if you push it a month, you push it 2 months, something like that? Is that like major impact, or something that you could potentially do?
So I'll answer that in 2 parts. Part 1 is we are currently scheduled to have the development done on November 12th. So our goal is to be fully developed by November 12th with all the things that will be rolling out in January. So we feel like that month and a half is enough time to fix any issues at that point, especially because we've been demonstrating and testing them up till now. So we're really only looking at those last few items that sort of need to bring it all together in this sort of like last round of development. So yes, I think we do have plenty of time to make sure the January 1 product is good. The reason that we have this timeline is because the partners have requested that calendar changeover. So we're going to do our darndest to make sure that it happens. The reality is that the old system is there, and we can always use it. So the timeline could change if something disastrous strikes, but I think that is the plan that has a letter like way past the middle of the alphabet.
And all of that is absolutely true for the electronic dealer reporting online piece. The file upload portion does have another contingency that we do need to make that happen January 1. So there's some infrastructure issues that we have to move off of that technology.
I'm going to call on myself. I have a very specific question for the registration tracking. So we said we've been working very closely with our federal partners on that. Is that something that, for example, MRI is coming in with permit information so that there's the ability to look at data without having to request that from from our federal partners? Is it that specific? Okay. Julie said no in answer to my question.
No.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Any other questions for Julie? Okay. Seeing no other questions.
Okay. I'll keep talking now. So the biomodule status. The biomodule is one that's been around since the beginning of ACCSP. A few years back, that was redesigned by that group on the anticipation, by the biological committee, on the anticipation that we were starting to move away from catch and effort and as our primary focus, and wanted to really start ramping up the biological module. That's been reflected in the changes in the RFP. And so now we're really moving into populating data in the warehouse. So right now for existing data, we have the lobster, the herring, and the Jonah crab data. These are primarily the result of stock assessment projects that we've been involved in. Lobster for the longest time, every sort of 5 years, we were doing an intensive amount of lobster data to help those folks out. But it was really more of a species-based biomodule for a while. Some of the current projects that we're working on right now are the North Carolina DMF biological database. This is an ACCSP proposal to restructure their biological database, but it also creates a direct link to the data warehouse. They've already loaded data from 2011 to 2024 into the ACCSP from their system, and they are currently working on loading data back as far as 2000 as part of that. And one of the things that is a real key to this project is that the Science Center, the Southeast Fisheries Science Center, is picking up North Carolina data from ACCSP. So this is sort of a modernization to the data flow that's happening there. The second one is where we've really only provided the 2023 and 2024 data in that process so far, but those data are flowing into TIP. And so it's just sort of a change in the process, but it is a modernization of that data flow because it's more of a database connection link rather than the passing of files. The next one is sort of an inverse of that second bullet, where the Science Center, the Southeast Fisheries Science Center, the TRIP interview program called TIP, I'm thinking everyone probably knows it as TIP, is that staff from Science Center and ACCSP have worked together to transfer the TIP data from South Carolina through Florida. Currently, we have data from 2023 and 2024 in our system from that. And coming soon being completely dependent on federal government timelines, is the 2014 to the 2022 data. One of the biggest reasons that these projects are, as a group, a really important start is that this provides an opportunity for ACCSP to expand the participation that we have in the CDAR process. Right now, the Science Center, Larry Bierkircher, doesn't have the opportunity to attend the CDARs, but he's often been asked to provide these TIP data for the assessments. And so if ACCSP is in the room providing the commercial landings data, we would also be able to provide this data set the same way that Larry has in the past, but also then be there to make any changes. And so that could actually enhance the efficiency of that process. So that's why this group of projects is so important. Moving forward, what we want to do is just develop an annual process, very much like the spring and fall data loads that we have now for the commercial catch and effort. So we're going to be working with additional partners to set up those biofeeds, and rather than focusing on, oh, this species, because we do stock assessments for that, we're really just going to be focusing on the entire biological sampling program. Some states have one, some states have a couple of different ones that might be regional or otherwise focused differently, but we're going to be moving those data in as well. And Sky and Michael are already in conversations with a number of partners on moving those data over. So that's where we are on the biological module specifically. One of the additional things that we did do is that we participated in a GARFO-hosted biological sampling workshop. And this was an information exchange. It was a really good opportunity to learn from others. It was a state-federal workshop that they hosted to explore some of the current biological sampling programs, and ACCSP presented on our biological module. And we also focused on the opportunity for centralizing the database. Again, as I mentioned with the CDAR projects, the centralization of biological data can hopefully help streamline some of the stock assessment and other science activities. So this project, or this workshop, was hosted in September, so they got it in under the wire at the end of September, and just really sort of laid the groundwork for some future opportunities. So we're looking forward to that. I can pause again if anyone has any questions.
Any questions for Julie on the biosampling? Continue on.
Right. So the next one is the committee participation guidelines. We did update this document. It was a one-page document that just sort of outlined the roles previously. But some of the committees were looking for a little bit more guidance on consensus building. So we added that as a second page in that guidance. And so now it's updated. The other thing that we want to do this winter is we want to host a meeting facilitation training with the ACCSP chair and vice chairs. And we're going to be doing that in conjunction with the FIS Quality Management and Continuous Improvement Professional Specialty Group. I didn't use the acronym there because it didn't think it would be well known, but it's a really long title. Basically, it's just a group of folks that work on quality management, so they have facilitation expertise, and we're going to try to work with some of the folks that are in other FINs and or are contractors, because they will be working. The majority of the group is unfortunately not working at this time, but Alex and I are members of that group, so we're going to ping on a couple of the people that we know are working to help us out with this. The next thing I want to talk about is the limited confidential access. One of the things that we wanted to note is that this is a project that we initiated on behalf of partner requests. In the past, when someone applied for confidential access, they were given a database account and then they had access to the database. However, a lot of folks wanted the requesters to sign those documents even if they were looking for just a custom data request. And so we built this in response to that. So there are now essentially two levels of confidential access permissions. Thanks. The first one is that limited access, which means you sign the form and that now allows you to receive or view confidential data. So if you're part of a committee where they're going to be presenting that as part of a TC, you can be in the room. But you do not have a confidential account inside the data warehouse. You can't go in and query any of your own data. So it is a more restricted form of access to the data. Then there's the full access, which is essentially the way it was before, which means that you get an account and you can request or query or view the confidential information. So essentially the limited access is, like I said, for the CDAR folks and the other stock assessment folks, and for anyone who is working on a grant or a specific project where they really just need a custom data request. Whereas staff for the partners, data security contacts, those kind of staff need access to data on a regular basis, and so they would still have those full access. So limited access in action. So since August 1st of 2021, or August 1st of 2025, because we did this year, pardon me, we've actually had about 46% of the accounts that have been created, which have been about a little over 100. Those accounts have been, or they've been either created or renewed. Those have been about 46% a limited access. So about half of the people that would have necessarily had full access now don't have that full access. So this project is working very well moving forward. And that is the end of my slides.
Any questions on limited access for Julie? Okay. Okay. Yes. So the 2026 action plan. So this will be presented to the business session for action. So there is expected to be a discussion on it then, but we still wanted to open up the opportunity. We do have a few minutes here for any questions on the action plan or discussion if anybody has any. Seeing no hands. Any online? No. Okay. And then we have just one more slide here that is just ACCSP by the numbers for your viewing enjoyment. And that concludes our meeting today. So anybody opposed to adjourning? Seeing none, we are adjourned.